All right. So thanks, Rob. Before I jump in today's talk,
Jeff, unmute yourself. There you go.
there we go. Before I get into tonight's talk, I just wanted to get a little bit of a glimpse into the future. So January, we have our next monthly meeting, and our very own Rob Lancaster is going to be giving a presentation about a recent, really cool video he did about Mars. And we have a series of talks. I can't remember the exact calendar, but the season's filling out very nicely. The other really neat announcement that I wanted to make that was, it's included in the focus, but I had a discussion with some of the leadership of the Chester County Astronomical Society. That's the group that we joined a couple months ago for that joint session. And we have agreed that we would co-invite each other to our presentations. They meet the second Tuesday of the month, and we meet on the third Tuesday of the month. So there's no conflict. And so we will be inviting their club to our meetings, and they will be inviting us to their meetings. If you look at the focus, they actually have their entire season already scheduled and planned out. So you can see the talks that are coming up from them. And then what's going to happen is their club is going to forward me their Zoom link, and then I will be distributing it to you guys. So we'll see how that goes. That should be really exciting. So basically, we'll all get double the astronomy at no extra cost. So we'll see. That should be really exciting. And as some of us have been talking, maybe this is a step towards some bigger collaboration between the local clubs, even once we get out of quarantine. So who knows? It'll be an interesting experiment. So keep your eyes peeled. Again, the current focus has the list of their talks, and I will be sending Zoom links as I get them closer to the beginning of each meeting. So that should be really cool and exciting, and we'll see how it goes. So bringing us to tonight's meeting, a big thanks to Bob Jorgenson for joining us tonight. So Bob is an avid visual astronomer who is a member of both the Mont Astronomical Association and the Chestmont Astronomical Society. And I believe a couple of his friends from those clubs are with us here tonight. So Bob is going to be giving us a talk about one of his passions, which is large aperture Dobsonian telescopes. Bob, it is all yours. Oh, and sorry, just to give so as Rob mentioned, we are going to encourage people, if they have questions, to put them in the chat. Unlike in the past where I would just randomly interject and interrupt the speaker to ask the questions, Bob's talk is going to be in 3 parts. So actually, I'm just going to build up and save the questions for in between his segments, and then we'll ask them then. So if you ask a question via chat and you don't see me bringing it up immediately, don't worry, patient. When Bob has his natural breaks is where we'll cut in and ask the questions. So with that, Bob, it's all yours.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for allowing me to give this presentation. A little bit of backstory on me and the presentation. I purchased this telescope from Rob Cordovari just about 3 years ago. It was December 3rd, 3 years ago when I purchased the telescope. I shortly after that joined the Chestmont group because they are the ones in the area with all the large Dobsonian telescopes. And given that I was upgrading from a telescope that was a 10-inch tube telescope, Orion XT10i, I needed to get together with some people that really understood how to use these large aperture telescopes. So my presentation, it's a 3-part presentation. The first part is a PowerPoint slideshow. And then there's a presentation on a video with me assembling the telescope. And then there's a second video where I'm explaining how I use the ServoCAT and Nexus digital setting circles and what I go through every time when I use the telescope. I was asked by the Mont club to give this presentation because I am the only member in that club with a large aperture telescope with all the, the apparatus that's on it. So they were all very curious to learn more about it. So they asked me to give the presentation, and then, so here we are here today. So with that, I'll get into the presentation. The first is the slide. I got to share my screen. Share screen, computer sound. Okay. Get back to the beginning. So what I'm here going to tell you about is give you a little bit of a backstory on obsession telescopes, and Dave Craigie, who's you know, the telescope, the developer of the telescope. But here you can see here, the photo on the left is the first day when I had the telescope. I had to get it set up, you know, and practice setting it up. So I did that. But then here's a picture in the center is me at Blue Mountain Vista Observatory. Igor Pashenko took this photo of me one night when we were out there. So obsession telescopes, this was Dave Craigie's sort of vision a little over 30 years ago, where he kind of saw a void in the telescope market for some premium large aperture Dobsonian telescopes. So he took it kind of upon himself to develop something that, you know, wasn't out there, and he was you know, just saw that there was a great need for this in the market back in the mid-late 80s. So, you know, and even, you know, like quite literally, he wrote the book on how to build these telescopes. This is, you know, his famous book that, you know, many people have purchased and used. There's a lot of photos, drawings, in the book that explain how to build a telescope for all you DIY guys out there that want to build their own telescope, you know, depending on, you know, however large you want to do it. But, you know, so much so with Dave Craigie's innovation and developing these telescopes, as you can see, everybody out there really is copying him to a great extent on what he did, but everybody brings in their little nuances and innovations to it. Some of them are using maybe a little more metal and aluminum, some using some carbon fiber elements, different rocker arm assemblies and things like that. But the overall basic design really hasn't changed that significantly from what he started over 30 years ago. So some of the first that obsession telescopes started was, yeah, he's been in business for over 30 years. But he was the first to really focus on the quality of the mirrors in the telescopes. And he only used the highest coatings and technologies in the development of the mirrors. He was the first to use the ServoCAT go-to drive system, which almost all the manufacturers in the US anyway are using that system on their large format Dobsonian telescopes. He's, you know, worked with StellarCAT and that with the Argo Navis as well, with the digital setting circles. He still uses that. I know some other people are using other digital setting circles nowadays. And he started off with using the 10,000 count encoders, which were very high quality. Then now he's, you know, it's up to the technology has changed so much that they're using 32,000 count encoders, which to me, I don't know if there's a lot of value in that going up that high, but it definitely, you know, you got a little bit better stepping action with the enhanced encoders, but I don't know if there's, you know, an incredible amount of value in going up that high. This is the first, you know, come up with development of how you can collimate with a secondary mirror that's almost using like a Bob's knobs kind of action on the secondary mirror, where it's really just this push-pull action with, you know, thumb turn screws, which is very easy to use. You don't need a tool to help with your collimation. And obviously, you know, he was developing these Teflon bearing pads that are used for, you know, the azimuth and even in the altitude assembly. And then he, with the altitude bearings, he's was the first to use the ebony star laminate, which became sort of the industry standard for anti-friction bearings in the altitude on for rocker arms and any other, you know, type of assemblies that are using on even smaller Dobsonians. And so what has Obsession's been doing lately? Last year, they produced 10 20-inch f4 classic telescopes, which is very similar to mine. And then he's really delving into these ultra compact scopes now, where they produced 20 of the 22-inch f4.2s last year, back in 2019. And then in 2020 and 21, they're increasing their production, where they're going to have about 50 15-inch f4.2s and 25 18-inch ultra compacts that are going into production, or already built or in production at the moment. So here's a photo of my telescope, and Rob Cordovari is probably going to recognize some of these photos because he gave them to me when I was looking to purchase this from him. But what it is it's a reflector Dobsonian mount telescope. The truss design for these telescopes is they're sort of triangulated aluminum truss tubes, which is a serrular truss design, and you'll see that in more detail later when I actually assemble it when the light shroud is not on there. But the primary mirror it's a 20-inch mirror that's located down in the base of the telescope. The focal length is 2,540 millimeters, which gives me an F ratio of really close to F5. The secondary mirror up in the upper assembly is a 3-inch mirror. There's a cast aluminum rocker arm bearings for the altitude. The mirror cell down at the back, which you'll see later, is an 18-point mirror cell. The light shroud, the black shroud that's covering up over the truss tubes, it's a Kydex material that is somewhat water repellent, which helps with managing dew in the evenings, but it really does a really excellent job of minimizing the amount of light that gets going through. That it really pretty much blocks all the light so that you don't get a lot of unnecessary light down at the primary mirror. The published sort of limiting stellar magnitude for this telescope that I have is 16.5, which is a very faint star for, especially in the areas around here. You probably got to get to, like a Chestmont or somewhere dark like that. Cherry Springs or somewhere dark like that to, really get to that limiting stellar magnitude. The darker your side, obviously, is the better. When I have this telescope pointed straight up to zenith, that puts the eyepiece, which is right here, about 8 feet 6 inches off the ground. And like I said, I use the ServoCAT 3 and the Nexus digital setting circles. As you can see on here, it has the Argo Navis is in this photo. But here's a photo of the mirror box. It's 27 inches by 25 inches. The weight of the assembly down here, the base and the mirror box, is about 110 pounds, which is quite heavy. It's more than I really want to lift by myself. But when you have the wheelbarrow handles on it, when I'm rolling the telescope around to move it in position, that reduces that 110 pound weight down to 25 pounds, which is extremely manageable. All the wood box assembly is made with airplane grade apple ply, which is 5/8 thickness. He uses Dave Craigie at Obsession, they use a 5-coat polyurethane spray finish to really seal in the wood very well. I haven't seen any degradation of the wood. I think this telescope's like 15 years old, and the wood is just in excellent condition still. It's a fully braced glued and dowel joinery system on the boxes. And then one of the neat innovations that he came up with is, you see this light baffle up here at the top of the scope that has a circular cutout that allows the light down to the mirror, but it also this light baffle helps to reduce some of the stray light that might come in underneath the light shroud and get down into the mirror. And then to protect the mirror, while it's not in use, there's a wood snap-in cover that fits over that circle cutout. And then the truss poles that you can see here are a 1.25 inch aluminum tube, and they're connected into wood block connections on the side, which I'll show you more detail later on in the presentation. As I said, Dave Craigie at Obsession Telescopes, he utilizes 2-inch mirror blanks of fused quartz, and he purchases all of his mirrors from some of the best mirror fabricators in the country. Mostly he's using Osterhowski Optics and Optical Mechanics Inc. My mirror is from OMI, but the quality of these mirrors is just incredibly well done. I mean, they're producing a 1/4-inch wave across the full mirror. So those of you that I know, like Robert Lancaster, I think you said you've made your own mirror, so you might be able to appreciate, you know, the quality of the mirrors that they're fabricating for these telescopes. They're of, you know, the topmost quality, and he's using a 96% enhanced aluminum coating. And this produces just premium diffraction limited mirrors. It just, the quality of the observation I get with my mirror is just really fantastic. I'm just incredibly pleased with it. And the secondary mirrors, they're, you know, also just extremely high quality. They're, you know, also diffraction limited mirrors. Most of them are coming from either Osterhowski Optics or United Lens. These are at to an even better, you know, smoothness level with a 1/10 wave or better. And, you know, they're using a brilliant diamond coating on these mirrors that produce like a 96% reflectivity, which is, you know, just really good optics for this type of a telescope. And with a setup for my telescope, this secondary mirror is creating about a 15% obstruction of the primary mirror, which isn't that bad. It's not really that distracting from the quality of what the observations are. This is a photo of the bottom box of the rocker box with the primary mirror taken out. It's showing where all the ServoCAT equipment is located. There's a azimuth motor assembly in the upper right. Power distribution rail at the bottom, the ServoCAT 3 device. The azimuth encoder is located in the center. There's some wires connecting everything. The altitude drive motor is mounted on the outside of the box. And then, you know, the altitude encoder connection is right here, sort of in the center of the mirror box when the mirror is in there. It's not connected right at the moment because the mirror is out of the box. This is some close-up view of some of the various components of the ServoCAT and drive motors. Not a whole lot to explain on here. We'll get into that a little bit more in one of the videos. And then here's a photo of all the equipment from the outside of the box. The one is there's this cat stock assembly that's mounted right here on a pole. All the wires that come out from the box are connected into this. And then, you know, there's some connections for the wires to run up that connect into the Nexus DSC and the ServoCAT controllers up at, they're mounted up here at the top of the cat stock. You can see right here in the center, the altitude encoder is connected. There's this black arm that kind of stabilizes the altitude encoder with the box. So as the telescope is, you know, rotating up and down in altitude, you want to keep that, you know, fully aligned, and that stabilizing arm helps with that. And, you know, you can see a nice photo of the cast aluminum rocker arms. And then up at the upper tube assembly, my telescope has a feather touch focuser. That's not the standard focuser with the Obsessions, but it's you know, an upgrade focuser that he will put on the telescope for you. Mine has a Stellar View F60 M2 10x60 finder scope. I have a illuminated reticle eyepiece on it, which helps for, you know, aligning, you know, pinpoint on stars with the finder scope. And I use the Telrad finder, you know, extensively with the telescope. On the other side of the Telrad, there's a Thousand Oaks dew heater, and you can see there's some wires connecting up here that I have powered aluminum truss poles that, you know, the main power is down at the bottom of the telescope in the rocker box, but there's wire connections on the truss poles that bring the power up to the dew heaters up at the top of the upper tube assembly. And my telescope currently is using these ball and socket truss pole connections that you can see right here on the lower right. Most of the time, these telescopes will come with sort of a clamp connection, which, I could get put back on this telescope, but this is what it came with when I got it from Rob, and they seem to be working just fine. I haven't had any issues with them. And when I arrive out to a site for observing, this is all the equipment I bring with me. I have it kind of laid out on my front lawn. You can see the mirror box, the upper tube assembly. I have some ATV ramps that are up here at the top that I, whoops, sorry, got out of that slide, that I use to roll the telescope box in and out of my van. Very convenient there. I have a bag with my truss poles, an equipment table, a ladder, because, as I said, when I'm pointed up high, it's, 8.5 feet off the ground. So I need a little nice step stool ladder to get up there. I have an eyepiece case, a couple of equipment boxes, and then there's a photo of the cat stock assembly. And here's like all the equipment that usually I'll get most of it laid out on my equipment table prior to assembly of the telescope. So I make sure I have everything I need and it's laid out convenient for the assembly process. The eyepieces I use most often with my telescope. And I would have to say the 10mm ethos is in my telescope almost all the time. I have a SIPS paracore on the telescope all the time, and the SIPS is a Starlight Instruments paracore system, but it's permanently mounted in the upper tube assembly. I'll show you that later. But I'm able to get like a 292 x magnification with the ethos. Probably the minimum with the eyepieces I have that I can get is a 94x, which is kind of high for a low end magnification, but that's the best I can do with my eyepieces. And just sort of an order of magnitude what the views look like using the 31mm Nagler. If I'm looking at the full moon with my telescope, and yes, it's extremely bright, the full moon just barely fits in the field of view of the 31 Nagler. So it's fairly wide view, just a little bit over 1 degree of true field of view. But as you can see, without even using any, I do have a TeleVue PowerMate 2.5, to increase the magnification. But even when I go down to my 6.7mm Explorer Scientific, I'm able to get up to 436 magnification, which is pretty good. I don't use that all the time, but I have used the PowerMate with some of the other eyepieces just to get the highest magnification I can when the scene's excellent. And so why would I want to get? Whoop, dang it! Why would I want to get a large telescope? I started off with this 5-inch Celestron Schmidt Cassegrain. I bought that several years ago from Skies Unlimited, just to see if I really wanted to get into this. And then I happened to look through somebody's like 12-inch telescope, and I was like, wow, I got to get me some of that. And so Aperture Fever kind of caught me. So I about a year later, I bought the Orion XT10i, and that scope was fabulous for me for a number of years. I just loved using it. I could see a lot of things I never even thought were possible. I also have a Lunt 50mm solar scope. And then one night when I happened to be up at Blue Mountain, got a text from Fred, or Fred actually texted Igor. Igor mentioned it to me that Rob was selling his telescope. And then, a month later, this 20-inch was mine. But this photo here kind of gives you a sense of scale, what the difference is from a 20-inch to a 5-inch to a 10-inch telescope, and then down to a 50mm. But, what is the true value of getting a large aperture telescope that's of really high quality? As you can see, which this view right here in the top in the center, that's, saying like it's an 8-inch telescope. That's probably the view of M13, the, Great Globular and Hercules that, everybody's seen. you know, it looks really good. But, you know, as you can see, when you're going up in the aperture and quality of these telescopes, we look at here at the 20-inch, what I have, the brilliance and the number of individual stars that you're able to see in that cluster is just phenomenal. And it's just, that's just being able to get the detail out of objects is one of the great benefits of having a large aperture telescope. To the point of something that, you know, I was always curious with was everybody would rant and rave about the Pinwheel Galaxy, how great it is. It's just this phenomenal galaxy. Well, looking through one of, you know, my smaller telescopes, it's like, yeah, I can see it. There's almost maybe some faint hints of some of the spiral arms. It is, you know, a very large, somewhat diffuse galaxy in my opinion, but, you know, it almost looked like just a round galaxy sometimes in my smallest scope, not really really well defined. But then when you get up to, you know, maybe a 10 or 12-inch telescope, yeah, you can really start to see the spiral arms, you know, especially in your darker skies, you know, and definitely darker skies help a lot. But then as you get up into, you know, the largest telescopes, you start to see well-defined spiral arms, and you can even, as you can notice on the left side, you start to see some of the details in these spiral arms that you could never see with a smaller aperture telescope. And a lot of that comes with having great seeing conditions and also, you know, a little bit of experience in observing and how you observe to see those types of details. And this last slide here is sort of give you a little example of or explanation on what some of the qualities of the different telescopes have and what, you know, the value is for some of these larger aperture telescopes. One of them is the light gathering power. You always hear aperture, 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 but what is it doing? It's gathering light. Light is what you need. You know, the more light you gather, you know, the better chance you have of, you know, seeing the details that you really want to see in the objects that you're looking at. And then, you know, the limiting stellar magnitude, you know, I spoke about a little bit, you know, mine will give me down to a 16.5 limiting magnitude, but, you know, going down with the smaller telescopes, you know, it's significantly dimmer quality stars that you're going to be able to see. And this is obviously at, you know, the darkest sites you can get to, say maybe at, you know, like Cherry Springs. This other one, which is kind of neat, is this Rayleigh resolution limit, which, you know, I like to akin that to that it's, you know, the ability to separate double stars. You know, one of them that's always, you know, kind of a challenge is, you know, to separate the pup out. I know Josh Wright gave a little presentation on this in one of the Chestmont presentation videos that they put together, but that's can be a difficult double star split sometimes, but, you know, if you have the right, you know, good seeing and, you know, a large aperture telescope, your ability to split some of these tough double stars and that is greatly enhanced. And then the, you know, the contrast limit is another one, which, you know, it basically is, you know, how what's the minimum sort of diameter of an object that you can see before it starts to fade from view. And, you know, that's probably one of the more significant ones with these large aperture telescopes is you can really drill down into some of this, you know, faintest, you know, farthest away galaxies that there's no way I would be able to see them with my 10-inch telescope, but definitely able to see, you know, with the 20-inch telescope. So with that, that's the end of the PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions at this point for me, or you want me to just proceed into the video?
So I was looking at it right now. There doesn't seem to be any questions. Okay,
that's fine. So let me go back a video. So I got this video. It's just to let you know, it's a hyperlapse video of me assembling my telescope. So it's going to be sort of fast paced. But first thing I do when I get to the site, I will move my telescope to a platform. If I'm in the grass, I will use this 24 by 24 3/4 inch piece of plywood to set my telescope on. It raises it up out of the grass so that when I rotate the telescope in azimuth, it will rotate freely. And now I'm assembling the truss poles into these wood blocks that tighten down with these star-shaped screws, which are very easy to use. Normally, I'm not rotating the base when I put the truss tubes in. I usually just walk around, but this way you can see the actual operation of it. And then I always double check to make sure everything's tightened down. And then the next thing I will do is put the upper cage onto the truss poles. That's fairly lightweight. Can usually carry that in one hand, but I just set that down, tighten down the thumb screws for that. And then I will also attach the wiring to the truss poles so that I can power the dew heaters. And then I always, at this point, just kind of rotate the telescope manually to make sure everything's operating correctly in a manual mode. And then I'll go and connect the battery up. And now I'm going to start with some of the other electrical connections and putting the capstock in. It has a little clamp block that it sets into and thumb turn tighten down. There's 4 cables that I connect into the capstock that come out of the rocker box. And then I'll usually do a quick power check to make sure the ServoCAT drive motors are operating correctly, and then I'll disengage those and continue with my setup. Next, I'll put on the light shroud. I need to get that on before, at least loosely on, before I attach the finder scopes to the upper assembly, because the light shroud won't fit over that equipment. And there I am. I'm putting on the finder scope. That's just a thumb screw onto a bracket, the tail rad. And then I'll go in and attach the dew heaters. I usually use 3 dew heaters. And then the tail rad, I have a dew heater for the tail rad. 2 of the dew heaters are for the finder scope and 1 is for the eyepieces. And there I'm putting in my illuminated reticle eyepiece into the finder scope. And now I'll go into the collimation of the telescope mode. Right there, I was removing my SIPs, the paracore, out of the cage. And then now I'm putting in a glider collimator. I'll check the secondary, make sure that's aligned. There's a thumb screws there that I'm turning. That's usually fairly close, even with the breakdown and setup of the telescope. Every time I use the secondary is usually fairly close to the center dot on the primary. And then now I'm checking the alignment on the primary mirror. I use a TU plug from Glider. And now that it's all collimated, I'll put the SIPS paracore back in, because I use that all the time. Wrapping the dew heater around that. And then after everything is assembled and I know the collimation is done, I will strap down the light shroud onto the base. As you can see, it gives pretty good coverage on there with the light shroud. And next is going into the actual alignment of the telescope. It's a basic 2-star alignment. You align to vertical, and then align to 2 stars. I almost always use Polaris, and then one of the prominent stars that come out early. And I usually do this alignment process in the manual mode as well. It's just a little quicker. And it saves a little bit on the battery, although I'm not too worried about that. And then once I got my alignment set up, then I usually will just go with a quick check on using the Nexus digital setting circles, and just pick a prominent Messier object and just point to it to see that the movement of the telescope with the ServoCAT and its alignment is what I want it to be. I am a little bit fussy with the alignment to make sure that the tracking and the movement of the telescope is very precise. You know, I like to, like I said, I like to keep the 10 millimeter in my eyepiece in the telescope all the time. So when I'm rotating and finding the next object like this, that 10 millimeter is still in there. And most of the time, the target I'm looking at is either right at the edge of the eyepiece field of view or very close to it with minimal search to find it. Once in a while, it's not exactly what I want, and I'll have to get out a lower magnification eyepiece. Well, that's the end of that presentation, but a couple of notes on that. That whole video live action was 27 minutes long, but the actual, I was 18 minutes into that video for the actual assembly of the telescope. The other 9 minutes or so was the operation of the telescope. Sorry, I got to stop this. Did anybody have any questions on that portion of the?
Yeah, Bob, a couple of questions have trickled in. So you answered the first one about, is that typical assembly about 18 minutes when you're in the field?
Yeah, yeah, that is. That's fairly normal. Actually, you know, the actual physical assembly of the telescope is, yeah, somewhere like 15 to 20 minutes. But then, you know, like I said, I do the actual alignment in that. I spend probably more time than that sometimes, making sure that my alignment, I didn't have to like align the finder scope with the telescope and the telrad. Sometimes that can take me a little bit of time. So, you know, that was skipped. That might be another 10 minutes of my time. And then we'll kind of fuss with to make sure that my actual alignment for the 2-star alignment is very accurate.
Cool. Does your telescope setup use any counterweights, or is the mirror itself sufficient?
Yeah, there is a counterweight. There's a steel tube at the base of the telescope that has some sand or something in it that is my counterweight.
Cool.
Because, you know, some of these eyepieces, like the 31 Nagler, that's quite heavy. So,
Cool.
you know, there would be a lot, you know, you need some counterweight just so that when you have the heavy eyepieces in that, it doesn't weigh it down.
Hey,
Cool.
Bob.
Yes.
Robert Workman here. Do you know the story of Paul Bailey, the original owner of your scope?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I know a little bit more about it. Because one time, I mean, Dave Craigie, he's a wonderful guy. I had to call him one time. I had a question about the scope. And, you know, he answered my questions in that. And then we talked for like another hour and a half, I think. It was amazing. It's just like, you know, they went the whole night. But anyway, the story is he delivered it to somebody, I forget his name, I wrote it down, to the Texas Star Party when it was first built. So he hand delivered the telescope to somebody there. And then Paul Bailey purchased the telescope from him. And, you know, then, you know, he had I don't know, you get,
Well,
Doc and Rob Cordovera, you would know more about the Paul Bailey story, but I have heard it.
Rob can jump in here, but Paul was an amazing guy. He was so amazing that we actually, until recent, were giving out the Paul Bailey Observers Award to members of Chestmont that exemplified Paul's spirit. Paul was, by trade, I believe he was a machinist. And unfortunately, Paul's deceased now. He passed away, I'm going to say almost 8 or 9 years ago. It's been, I can't remember exactly when.
It's actually more than that.
Is it more than that, Rob? Yeah. But
yeah.
I first met Paul when I got into this hobby, when I turned just 51, 52. And this guy shows up and he has one arm. And he set this telescope up And I'm not kidding, 10 minutes, and he's observing. So Paul, unfortunately, lost his arm to an osteosarcoma, and many years later, unfortunately, lost his life to metastatic osteosarcoma. And the most amazing thing that was inspirational to me and the members of the Chestmont is the night before Paul passed away was Starfest. And Paul came to Starfest with his sister. He could barely walk, he could barely talk, and he observed through every one of the 10-inch object rotoscopes, went home, and died. And it's emotional to us, and it's a great feeling for us to know that someone with just extreme enthusiasm for visual observing, like yourself, Bob, are keeping Paul's memory alive. Because every time we see you out on the field, you don't know it, but Rob, myself, Fred, others, we see Paul. We think about Paul. We don't talk about him much anymore, but he's always on our mind. And he was a true inspiration.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in and add about that. And Doc, you said it perfectly. But the reason, Bob, that telescope has, I'm almost certain Paul changed those to the ball and socket design, because that's how he could assemble it with one hand. But he lifted up that upper cage with one hand and put it on and assembled that thing. He actually also had a bar going across the two wheelbarrow handles so that he could lift it up with one hand and push it that way. So it's really amazing.
And he hauled it around in the back of his, did he have a Subaru?
Yeah, he had a little Subaru. It was amazing. And the funny thing is that Paul was an incredible person, because
if you needed
help,
decided
that he was selling the telescope, I felt like, it was a tough purchase for me, because there's obviously only one reason he was selling it, was because he just couldn't handle it anymore. And I felt really badly on the one hand, but he understood my hesitancy, and he was just thrilled that it was staying in the club. And I was upgrading just the way, Bob, you upgraded. I was upgrading from a 16 to a 20. So Paul was very pleased about that, and that the telescope was staying in the club. But the funny thing is, I went over to his house to pick up the telescope, and he had a 15-inch obsession sitting in the garage at the same time. So that's what he ended up using. But the other thing I wanted to mention is, Bob, the first time I looked through that telescope was with Paul out in the field, and I was really amazed at the optics in it. And you did get a really great telescope. That mirror in there, that OMI mirror is, I've been at a number of star parties with that telescope, and it had blown a number of telescopes away of other 20-inch telescopes. So you got a really nice telescope there. And when I wanted to sell the telescope, I actually called Paul's sister and told her that I was selling the telescope, and did she want it back? Did she have somebody in the family that wanted to buy it? And she said, no, I'll trust you. We have no interest in the telescope here. If it's going to somebody who's going to use it and enjoy it, then, go ahead and sell it. And Bob, when you came up to the house and bought the telescope, I was so happy, because I knew, I could see your enthusiasm. You were just like, you were busting at the seam when you came to my house that day. It was just so cool. And then just real brief, I don't mean to ramble, but the neat thing about the purchase of the telescope to Bob was that the reason I was selling the telescope was that I decided, I'm older than Bob, and I decided I did not want to climb the ladder anymore. So I was looking for a telescope where we're a little faster. And Josh Wright, who's on here, we had been looking at these JP Astrocrafts, and Josh found this telescope for me down in Georgia, and he said, hey, I think this is the telescope you're looking for. So I called the guy up, and it was. And I ran down there thinking, I got my dream telescope. This was the telescope I was looking for. I was going to buy it new and build it new, and I found it used. It was like a win-win. So I drove down to Georgia, bought the telescope, brought it home. Now I had this dilemma. Now I had two 20-inch telescopes in my garage, and that was not going over well at home. But then when Bob contacted me, he was doing the exact same thing. He was looking to find his dream telescope, and he was getting ready to buy it brand new. And he saw somebody selling it, and he called me up and he said, I want to buy your telescope. So it really worked out well. And then Bob, when you told us you were joining the club, we were there like, oh, this is great. Not only do we get a great new observing member to join the club, but Paul Bailey's telescope stays in the club. So it really has been a great addition to the club, and we're so happy that you're enjoying it so much. So congratulations on the scope and how well you use it, and how much you improved in observing just since I've known you, just in the few years I've known you. So great job.
Thank you.
Cool.
Hey,
Bob,
Josh, are you going to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just throw this out there. So Bob was talking about Dave and his personal ability, and just his enthusiasm for his scopes out in the field and being used. So just a few days ago, I was working on my scope, and in the primary mirror cell, there was a couple pieces that had been a little bent from fatigue, and I contacted Dave to just look into making the replacement of it, and just looking for advice. Pretty much was all I was looking for. And he was like, "Wow, I'm surprised that you've got this issue, and I'd be more than happy to send you the replacement parts." And I said, "No, after 10 years, about 30,000 miles of travel in a trailer, and about 3,000 hours of observing, I think it's past warranty. It's okay." And I just went ahead and replaced the parts. But it was just amazing. Like, the guy is so stand up on, just following up with the customer. And it was really impressive. You knew you were talking to somebody that was proud and passionate about his creations. And it is neat to see how, a quality built scope like that can get handed down from person to person and just keep continuing to give the good views.
Cool. Bob, a few other questions trickling in. Is this video your front yard?
Yes, it is. This is at my front yard.
Do you do any observing from home, or is it usually?
Yes. Yes, I do observe from home. Most of the time at home, sometimes I'll use the 5-inch, Smith Cassegrain. Mostly I'll use the 10-inch Dob, but I have used this telescope at home. Yeah.
Gotcha. How do you transport this guy?
I use a van, but like, Rob was saying is, it'll fit in the back of a small SUV. It's, very compact when you take it all apart, but I use a van just as convenient.
I used to put that in a Subaru Forester.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, but yeah, I'll, if it's a clear night, I'll be out observing at home if I can't get away to a darker site. So,
Cool.
and when I set this, we'll digress a little bit here. But when I first was out with my 10-inch Dob, the tube Dob, my family, the neighbors and friends, they kind of affectionately, called it the Cannon. And then now when I pull this telescope out and set it up, people driving down the street will stop and they'll be like, "What is that?" And that starts a conversation. I say it's a telescope, and there's like, "You got to be kidding me!" What And then you get the questions like, the typical ones about how far can you see and stuff like that. That
Flag on the moon.
yeah, can you see that? Yeah.
Bob, I had somebody who drove by my house and saw it set up during the daytime, and they thought I was putting up a new basketball court. So,
But yeah, I usually get the question, "What are you trying to observe?" And I'll be like, "Nothing now. It's daylight." But, is there something going on tonight? And I was like, "Yeah."
Cool.
The universe is out there. It's going to see what I can see.
Connect that. When you're home, can you leave that 20-inch kind of mostly set up and then wheel it out, or do you break it down?
No, I break it down. It's just our garage isn't big enough that I can leave it fully assembled. It's a little bit too compact and low ceilings, so I really can't. I've tried, but it just doesn't work real well to leave it fully set up at home.
Gotcha.
But like I said, it doesn't, I can have it, set up and using it in 15, being able to actually use it in 15 minutes. Sometimes when I'm at home, I'll just use it in push to mode. Because I might, maybe, the limiting magnitude for stars at home is not that good. I'm in, Bucks County, I'm right on the county line of Montgomery and Bucks County in Warminster. And it's, it's very bright. The light dome from Philadelphia is just awful.
Yeah.
Street lights in my neighborhood, that helps a lot, but usually I'll just do push to mode when I'm at home. I'm not going to be out all night long. I might only be out for a couple of hours.
And what is the darkest place you've had that, Bob? Is it still Blue Mountain Vista?
No, DS Edge.
Ed.
So I was at DS Edge with Rob, Chris, I think, and Carl.
Yeah.
That was one of my best days, best nights with this telescope. The scene was just superb.
That was a very good
I
night.
was
We were up there.
looking at some galaxies. One, if I remember correctly, was like a 16.8 mag galaxy. And I was really trying to push it to see one that was a little dimmer near it, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't confirm that I saw it. I wanted to tell myself I saw it, but it's just, I want to make sure I'm definite when I'm seeing something that faint. But it was one of the best nights ever. It was just an excellent night.
Hey, Bobby, didn't you have that down at Sean's also?
Oh yeah, I did do that. Rob
Yeah.
Lancaster was down there when we went down into Virginia at Sean's.
Yeah, that was a very good night. That
That
one
was-
night we were down there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was even out there the night before when no one else went out, when I was I just had to get out there and see, and I was like trying to catch the glimpses between all the clouds. And every time you would, it was just like, oh my God, it's dark down here.
Cool. Yeah, another question came in. Why is the 10 millimeter ethos your favorite eyepiece?
I just love the view through it. I think it gives me the right magnification for a lot of the things I'm looking at. I look at galaxies the most. Also, it's really good on planetary nebula. I can see a lot of good detail. And then when once I'm observing with it, if I want to increase the magnification, I know I can. And if I want to decrease the magnification, it gives me a good reference point from that point of view. But I love the field of view. It's very, very crisp eyepiece. The views are just excellent for that eyepiece.
Bob, you're showing that you're still a novice.
Yeah.
What you don't know is that your 10 millimeter ethos probably, and I haven't worked the mathematics, but it probably gives you the best exit pupil of about 2.4 millimeters. Several years ago at Texas Star Party, myself, Jack Goodwin, and another friend of ours had the opportunity to observe through Barbarella, 48 inches of aperture. And the eyepiece that was most often in the focuser was an 8 millimeter ethos. And I'm having a chemotherapy brain moment here. Josh, who owns that telescope? Jimmy Lowry. Jimmy Lowry, I asked Jimmy, I said, Jimmy, why do you put the 8 millimeter in there all the time? Why so much power? He says, because it gives me a 2 millimeter exit pupil, and that's perfect. So I'll bet you if you calculate your exit pupil from all your eyepieces, you'll find that one's probably somewhere between 2 and 4 millimeters. And that's why the views are so pleasing. In fact, I too use the 10 millimeter almost 99% of the time because it gives me a 2.4 millimeter exit pupil. And as you say, the views are well illuminated, they're crisp, and it's just, it's magical. And anybody should think about that when they're choosing eyepieces for visual observing.
I have the same focal length as what you got, Bob, and the 10 is my go-to, absolute favorite, 10 ethos.
That might be it. Yeah, I don't know a lot about the exit pupil, but that I've read about it, but that might be it. That's why the view is just so satisfying. It's just relaxed and just love looking through that.
I'll fourth that in the 10 millimeter in my 18 inch is a 2.2 millimeter exit pupil also. That's my most commonly used eyepiece now.
Cool.
Do One question.
I'm sorry?
Do you take pictures? Do you take pictures with it?
No, I'm not into astrophotography at all, really. I have like just with my phone, you know, like an afocal kind of shot just to see, but nah, I'm just really not into it. I like observing. I like hunting objects. I'm just so into it. I mean, I can just use it push to and just, here's an example. The first night out with it, went with the guys, everybody from Chestmont. There's quite a few of us, might have been 10 of us there at Hawk Mountain. And I was like, oh, my first night I went to M81, M82. It's like, I love those galaxies. I like looking at them. I look at them almost every time I can. And I was like, okay, yeah, they look awesome. And then just nudge the telescope a little bit to the side, looking, my finder charts and that, what I can see. Oh, there's a lot of galaxies in this area. 4 hours later, I was still like within a thumbprint, extended from my head, looking in the exact same area. It says, okay, that's enough. I need to move and look, go see some other things. It's just like, I must have saw like 24 really faint galaxies just in minuscule area of the sky. And I was like, this telescope is what I want. It was like, I was seeing things, just hunting around M81, 82, just looking at numerous galaxies.
Cool.
And that's what I like doing. I just love hunting and trying to find things.
So how often do you actually take this on the road if you don't observe that much with it at home?
I like to get out as often as I can each month. It's probably, you know how the clouds are around here. It's probably a couple of times a month only. But when I do go out, I'll set up at, before sunset, and then, I'm leaving like an hour before sunrise. So, sometimes that might be, this time of the year, that can be like a 10, 12-hour session.
What's your go-to site?
Blue Mountain mostly, just because it's convenient for me.
Well,
But
twice a month is very impressive.
I really want to get it pushed out, Josh, and them. They're trying to get me out to some of the darker sites out in Pennsylvania as well. But
Oh yeah, for sure. Like
We've
when it
got a
comes
few.
to Big Dobbs, the skies make a huge difference. I was calculating it the other day when I was on the phone with Dave, and I think I probably got about 30,000 miles of travel with my scope. I got it down to Texas, New Mexico multiple times, West Virginia. I tell you though, Bob, once you do that, you're always going to want to do that. So you better be put some miles on.
We need to take him down to Bob Pody's place in New Mexico.
yeah, I would love to do that.
Yeah. Yep. I also want to mention too, real quick, if you notice on this, on Bob's scope right there on that screenshot that's on the screen right now, there's two little switches on that mirror box. So when Rob owned this scope, I actually installed those on the scope, and that's the fan control and the dew heater.
Yeah,
that's a kit that Robert, who owns SDM?
Oh, Peter built my scope. Yeah, Peter Reed in Bunbartha, New South, actually in Victoria Province, Australia. Peter Reed, R-E-A-D. He's the owner of SDM Telescopes, which stands for Size Does Matter.
Yeah. So he that system is actually on Docs 22, and I was always impressed with the convenience, the streamlined look. And everything just, operates at a flip of a switch. You got full control over your fan, full control over 5 channels of dew heaters. So I contacted Peter Reed years ago and asked him for, could you put together a kit, just like Robert's got on his 22. And he sent me this kit, and I think it was like $100 or something like that. And everything's just all mapped out, drawn out. The wires are practically, cut to size. And I installed it on my scope, absolutely loved it. So then when Rob came over to get help installing the servo and Argo. I think we did it all at the same time then, Rob, didn't we? I guess.
Yes. Josh and I installed the servo and Argo. Right,
And-
Josh?
Yep. And we put that wiring system on there as well. So
I'm just teasing. I handed Josh the tools that he asked for. I got him a drink of water when he was thirsty.
but if you have any problems with that in the field, Bob, it's Rob's fault. He didn't get the right water.
Bob, you
No,
are
it's,
so lucky Josh lives in the area where you would not have servo on that telescope.
No, but at any rate, if you got a Dob and you're looking to do something with the fans and get dew control on it, call up Peter Reed at SDM. And
Yeah, actually,
Right.
the backstory about Peter is I met him in 2009 in Australia at a star party down there, and he had just delivered a binocular telescope with two 20-inch f5 mirrors, which worked for all of about I'd say 15 minutes before it dewed up, and they spent hours collimating it. We were sitting in a little corner, well, a little hotel. They call it hotel in Australia, in Coonabarabran, having dinner one night, and sitting across from me was Peter Reed, who I really didn't know, and next to me was another good friend from Australia, who says to Peter, Robert here has a 22-inch mirror, but he doesn't have a telescope to put it in. And Peter looked at me and says, yeah. I said, yeah, have you ever built a telescope for anybody in the United States? He said, nope. And then I asked him, would you? And he said, yep. And about 5 months later, in October of 2009, I had my 22-inch telescope. And in addition to the 22-inch telescope, Peter actually flew from Australia to Pennsylvania and spent a week with me to set it up and show me how to use it. So Peter was one of these, he's like the Dave Kriege of Australia, is the way to put it. And there are very few large Dob makers in the world anymore. There's Kriege's company, there's Rob Teeter, there's unfortunately Rick Singmaster from Star Master is now retired. There's Peter Reed in Australia. I don't really know many of the European makers about them, but it's really a small mafia, and they all watch one another. And one of the interesting things is, Bob, early on, you showed that slide that showed Teeter scopes, SDM scopes, obsession, yada, yada. Peter Reed from SDM, he basically stole the obsession design, and then he tweaked it with ideas from a friend of ours named John Banbury, who lives in south of Sydney. And one of the things that's unique about Peter scopes is, while Dave designs the removable mirror cover that snaps in place, it bothered John Banbury in Australia, because he also has an obsession of, he had a small one. I think he had a 15-inch at one point. It always bothered him that he would have to reach up under the shroud and remove the mirror box cover to use the scope, and then what to do with that mirror box cover, that 22-inch circle that you carefully put someplace so you don't lose it or forget it. And John said to Peter Reed, he says, well, why don't you just put a hinge on it like a toilet seat? And that's what he did. So the telescope, the mirror box opens like this, and you put it down. The other things is Peter Reed got away with the split block truss tube holders that you see around the top of the mirror box, and he replaced them with machine Delrin, and that avoids all problems with temperature expansion and contraction, because many obsession owners, myself included, I originally had an 18-inch obsession. Depending on the temperature, humidity, moisture, all sorts of things, sometimes getting the poles in and out of those split blocks was difficult. And the other problem is they sometimes truly do split. The wood breaks. So the Delrin plastic eliminates all those problems. But it's really kind of interesting when you set scopes next to one another. They're all takeoffs on John Dobson's original design. There's nothing really new under the sun since John Dobson came up with the original idea of a telescope that looks like a cannon. And that was my first introduction to large aperture telescopes back in about 2005. I heard about this group called Chestmont, and through one of my former employees, whose husband came across some Yahoo news group or something. I don't know, Rob Cordevari, where did you guys used to post things? On a website, or was there a news group, a Yahoo group? But anyway, this husband of my friend at work, he came across that there were a bunch of guys going up to this parking lot, somewhere up near Pottsville, to observe one night. This is in January 2005, I think it was. And I decided just to drive up to see what was all about. So I drove up, and as I'm driving in to this parking lot, which is next to the Appalachian Trail, I see these cannons, these black cannons sticking up in the air. And I didn't realize what I was looking at was a 20-inch Ed's 20-inch, Ed's 20-inch. There was another 20-inch, I forget who owned it. There was a 18-inch. There was a 15-inch. And I think Lou Berman was there with a 10-inch. But I'd never seen so many large telescopes in my life. And from that January of 2005 till April of 2005 is when I bought my first obsession, an 18-inch, which I used aggressively for about 5 years before I got my 22-inch. So a lot of aperture in the Chestmont Club. And then Josh, remember when he joined, he had an 8-inch SCT, and he made the mistake of coming to West Virginia with us on one of our observing trips. And he was surrounded by 20-inch, 18-inch, I forget who had the biggest scope down. Carl, I think, had his 22-inch down there. And within a short time, Josh bought a 16-inch light bridge, right, Josh? And then a couple years later, he just wanted to go deep. And I know he bought his 25-inch f4 obsession. He's never turned back. And one of the members of DAS, who will go nameless, but you all know who he is. He's probably the craziest member of your group. I don't know if he's still on here. Jack, are you still here? He's going big time telescope. I don't see if Jack's still on here. Yes, he is. Maybe he'll talk about his recent purchase about large aperture. I'll shut up.
We do want to make sure that anybody who does have a question for Bob gets it answered.
Yeah, Bob, a question came up. Do you use glasses when you're observing?
No, I don't. I mean, I need glasses. I wear glasses, need them for reading. So I'm taking them off all the time. I usually just take them off, prop them up on top of my head when I'm observing. I don't like using the glasses at the eyepiece.
Cool.
So my left eye is very good for distancing, so it works out kind of nice. I use my left when I'm observing.
Well, Bob, I think that covered all the questions for now. Do you want to go on to your next video?
Sure, I can. This one is a little over 15 minutes long. It's a video. This was the part where I wanted to do a live demonstration of explaining the ServoCAT and Nexus digital setting circles and how I use them. But, given, the weather and timing in that, I just ended up doing a one take sort of live video of me doing it. There's a couple of misspeaks in there that some people will catch on, but it's not that bad. It's mostly fairly good. So I'll go to that. Hello everyone, this is Bob Jorgenson, and I'm standing here with my 20-inch Obsession telescope. I'm going to give you a presentation explaining the ServoCAT drive mechanism and the Nexus digital setting circles that I utilize on my telescope. As we come over to the telescope, you will notice that there are a lot of cables coming out the side box of the telescope, and as I come over to the rear, going down underneath the telescope, you'll see there's a lot of other cables, power distribution and everything that operate all the electronics on the telescope. Over here on the left is the ServoCAT module, which is the sort of drive mechanism or power mechanism, brains of the drive mechanism for the telescope. There is a power module, a lot of cables coming there. Most of them come out over to the cat stalk, which On top of the CAT stock is the Nexus DSC computer module, and also a wired hand controller for the ServoCAT. As you come down to the base of the CAT stock, that's where all the cable connections are. On the left side are all the cables coming out of the mirror box. You have a power cable, a hand controller cable, digital setting circles cable, and an encoder cable. The encoder cable is split in two. One of the cables is for the altitude motor and the other is for the azimuth motor. When you come over to the right side of the CAT stock, you have all the same cables, and these are the cables that run up the CAT stock and come out the top to make the connections to the various devices that are on the acrylic shelf. One thing to note when you're looking at all of these cables, every one of them is a slightly different size, so it's impossible to make a wrong connection, even in the dark. So it greatly simplifies the operation. On the outside of the box, this is the altitude drive motor for the ServoCAT. This drive mechanism is a wired spindle. You'll see that right here is the spindle. It has a cable that's looped around it, and that cable, one is connected up here at the top of the rocker arm, and it has a latch mechanism that's this is a disengage. Now it's engaged. The cable wraps all the way around and is screwed to the other side of the rocker arm. And then as for the azimuth drive motor, which is located inside the box, and this is a knurled knob drive mechanism. And the knurled knob, if I can get down low enough, you might be able to see it, maybe this side, but there is a knurled knob that is located directly, I can't see it, but it rubs up against the rotating circular platform, and it also has a disengage lever and an engage mode. So when you disengage, it's, as you can see with my hand, very easy to rotate the scope manually, and similarly in the altitude mode. Well, now the next step I want to show you is how we actually set up the telescope so that I operate it every night. The first thing I always do is disengage each of the levers for the ServoCAT, and this is to verify that the telescope is moving properly. So I usually grab the front of the telescope and I will rotate it manually from side to side, and then check it both for up and down motion. Now that I'm satisfied that the telescope is rotating in all directions correctly, then I will proceed to start engaging the electronics of the telescope. The battery for my telescope is located on the front box of the box. Plug-in connection. What I have is a tracer 12 volt 22 amp hour battery. It's a lithium polymer. And then the next step I do is I'll come around to the rear of the box, and then on the power distribution module, you'll see there's four cables coming in. There's an AB switch and a CD switch. The AB switch, I only have one cable there coming out of the B module, and that is what powers my mirror fan on the primary mirror, and it also provides power to the truss poles which go up to my dew heaters mounted on the top of the box. The red cable is the power input as it's labeled, and the C and D are the power cables for the ServoCAT. So I'll hit the CD switch. Now that will turn on the ServoCAT. You can hopefully see that there is a green light that is lit up. That means that the power connection was successful. But that's only the first step. The next step I want to make is to turn on the Nexus digital setting circles. There's an on-off switch. I turn that switch on. We hopefully will see it light up, and you should hear some beeping. And that means that there's good connection and communication between the Nexus DSC and the ServoCAT. You'll see on the ServoCAT where the DSC cable is coming in, that light is blinking. That means we have a connection, but the telescope has not been aligned, so there's additional steps we need to make. What we have to do is the usual for a lot of telescopes is a 2-star alignment. The way it works on the Nexus, you can see there's a bunch of settings. One of them is align. It will default to that. So we want to do the alignment, so I will press the OK key. And it now says we need. So that is a vertical alignment. I usually adjust this telescope a couple of times, take it up manually to vertical, and then I come down to the Nexus DSC and hit OK. As you can see there, it says we are aligned, our altitude angle is 90 degrees. That is great. So then I will hit the OK button. And now it says, now we're starting the actual 2-star alignment. Almost always it will default to Polaris because that is the one I will use the most. So now I will manually rotate my telescope down and over to Polaris, which is over about here, about 41 degrees here in Pennsylvania. Once I've had comfortable that I have it aligned, I come and hit OK. And the next thing it says is I need to pick a second star. The last time I used the telescope, I used Deneb. I don't want to do that today. I want to use Altair. So I will use the up-down arrows on the device, and I will scroll down until I see Altair come up. Once I see Altair, I will now once again manually move the telescope over to the approximate location of Altair. I believe it's up fairly high today, this time of the day. Once I feel my alignment is close, normally I would do this through the eyepiece, but I'm not doing that today. I will hit OK. When you hear that series of beeps there, that means you were successful. It says my alignment error is 18.5, not unusual, seeing that I'm doing it in the daytime and I'm not actually using an eyepiece. Normally, that number would be less than 1 and hopefully less than 0.5. Now that I know I have a successful alignment, we'll go back over to the ServoCAT, and you'll see that the red light is no longer beeping, but you see the yellow light is beeping. And when I pull up the cable, that is for the hand controller. I have not turned the hand controller on, and that is a very simple step. There's the ServoCAT hand controller. There's 4 buttons here, up, down, clockwise, counterclockwise, but then there's a series of other buttons which normally when I'm in operation mode, I will hit the slew button, which is the fastest operation of the telescope. Jog is a little slower. The guide fast and guide slow are functions that I can use when I'm up at the eyepiece. It'll operate even more of a smaller stepping action for the movement of the telescope. And then also down at the bottom, there's a search wide and a search new, which I'm not going to get into big explanation, but you use them when the object that you're trying to locate didn't quite show up in your eyepiece and you need to search for it. And then, but the other main function is the go-to, which I will talk about in a moment. So now we're ready to actually locate. But the next step I want to do so that I can actually use the tracking and motorization of the telescope, I need to engage the ServoCAT motors. Lever, and I will engage that one. And then I'll come down to the front bottom and engage the azimuth motor. So it says our alignment was successful. To get out of this mode, you press the escape button. And then now I want to search. So I use the right arrow key. It goes over to the find magnifying glass. That's kind of a normal search symbol. I will hit OK. And I want to search from catalogs. So I will say OK. And then it has this program is loaded with all the deep sky object catalogs or ours. Right now it's on NGC, but I want to go to a Messier catalog. They're in alphabetical order, so I will go to Messier, and I want to look at M27. Right now it's on M91. That's probably the last object I looked at in the Messier catalog. So once I'm in the Messier catalog, I can just hit the numbers for the object. So I will press 2, 7, and then I will hit OK. And as you can see, if you can read that, it says that the in Vulpecula, and it is 15.2 degrees to the left and 5.3 degrees up from the telescope's current location. So now, hand controller and press the go to button, and the telescope will move to that location of the M27 object. So you can hear the motor slewing, and the telescope moved over the 15.3 degrees and up a few degrees. I will next select a different object, and this time I want to go to the NGC catalog, so I need to escape out of the Messier catalog, and then I will scroll back up to the NGC catalog, hit OK, and I want to select NGC object 4, 2, 3, 6, which is a spiral galaxy in Draco. And another function before I hit the go to I want to show you is there's a lot of additional information about this object. You'll see there's a little green to the right arrow. I can push that and it'll give me a lot of other information about this object that I might be interested during my time viewing it. And then as you scroll through that, it brings you right back. As you can see, my telescope now needs to move 103 degrees to the left and about 14.5 degrees up. So I will now come over to the ServoCAT hand controller and push go to. Now the telescope is moving over to the new location. And this is normally when I would move my stepladder to get in a better viewing position. And with that, that is the end of the presentation. I'll stop my screen share for everybody can see each other. Well, that was the presentation.
Bob, a few more questions trickled in.
Questions or comments about this law?
Yes. So yeah, first of all, let me give a big thanks, Bob. There were a few more questions, but let me give you a big thanks. I just wanted to say a big thanks for coming out. If people, might start, dropping off, but obviously it'd encourage people to hang on as long as the questions and the willingness to answer those questions persists. But again, just wanted to say, big thanks, Bob.
Oh, not a problem. My
Really
pleasure.
cool, and
Thanks, Bob.
really awesome to clearly hear your passion for visual observing in large telescopes. So that's really cool.
Yeah, like I said, I don't get out enough. It's just, I wish there was clear skies. I need to move to New Mexico or something like that. My wife and I joke about that. I'll have to retire somewhere where I can observe, like 200 days a year.
Right. So one question, my understanding that scope came with Argo Navis DSCs, but you switched to the Nexus?
Yeah, it came with, I think if I heard you correctly, it came with the Argo Navis, which I used maybe for like a year and a half. And I didn't have any issues with it, but I kind of noticed that a lot of other people, some at Chestmont and some just other people that I happened to be around observing other places, people were, and reading on cloudy nights and that, people were switching to the Nexus DSC. Maybe it's a little more user friendly. So one of the next time I was up at NEAF, I went and I, spoke to Serge about it. And, then of course he talked me into just buying one. So I did that. And, I like it a lot. It's more the way I want to use the digital setting circles. The Argo Navis, sometimes in the cold, kind of scrolling with your finger to get everything dialed up was not as much fun, I guess. So. But it worked fine. I mean, it still had, great catalogs and everything like that. But I just like the interface of the Nexus a little better.
Cool. And when you do your alignment, do you do it manually pushing like you showed in the video, or do you use the motors?
I normally will do it manually, just pushing it. I have done it using the motors, but I like to do it quicker. And I can do that in the manual mode a little better, because I think the faster you can do the 2-star alignment, the little better that alignment can be.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. I wanted to find out how you were doing that, because I also like to push my telescope for the 2-star alignment because it is faster. But what I found the better way for me, what I found out that gives me more accuracy is that so let's say I'm pushing to Polaris, because I use Polaris also. I'll manually push the telescope to Polaris, get Polaris in the center of the eyepiece, then move it to the side, and then engage the motor, then center the star with the motor, then disengage and go to the second star, push it to the side of the eyepiece, engage the motor, get it centered. Because if you do it manually and then engage the motors, you could be knocking your accuracy off.
Yeah, that is true.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like,
I understand that.
So in other words, you push it manually to the star. So you push it to, say, Polaris. So here's your eyepiece, and my nose is Polaris. So you right now you're not engaged. So you push Polaris up to the corner of the eyepiece, and then engage the drive. It'll bump Polaris back closer to the center, and then you can do your alignment while the telescope is engaged. So that now when you've done your 2-star alignment, it's done engaged. You should just try it that way. I think it'll be more accurate than going to the star unengaged and hitting star 1, pushing to the second star, hitting star 2, and then engaging the telescope, I believe you're going to throw your accuracy off a little bit.
I don't think that's the case, Robin. I could be wrong about this. And in all honesty, my scope is not super accurate. It's one thing I've always looked to want to improve on it. But the way I understand it, the drive is completely disconnected from the setting circles.
Yeah.
So technically, now, Bob, what you mentioned about the amount of time, I also was under the impression that no matter how long you took, it didn't matter. And I could be wrong about that as well. But I do know I always do my go-tos with the motors engaged, because if you stop and start really quick, if there's any kind of encoder slippage, that's where your encoders will slip. So I like a nice smooth start and motion from star to star. But that being said, my go-tos aren't really that accurate. So I can't speak with any kind of advice on that. But I don't think it matters whether your drive's in or out, because it's just what the encoders are sensing.
Yeah, if I may.
I'm gonna try to do it manually now, Bob, based on what you said about the time of it, because definitely, even at the fastest slew speed on the servo, you're much slower than manually pushing it. So I'm gonna, next time I'm out, you know, this is good info to play around with.
Well, I think the speaker, you align by hand or without the motors engaged, and then you observe for the rest of the night with the go-to, namely with the motors, right?
Correct. Yeah, almost all the time. But with like Josh was saying, the ServoCAT, drive motors and that are independent from the digital setting circle, so you can disengage and re-engage throughout the night. But usually, once I put it in go-to mode using the ServoCAT, I'm just using that the rest of the night.
With these very large Dobbs, even with a 31 Nagler, or I have a 30 millimeter lights, the field of view is so small that when you're looking at an object or a group of objects like Markarian's chain, what most of us will do, will go to one of the main galaxies, like is it M84, and we'll just disengage the scope and then basically move the scope manually and go up and down Markarian's chain, or if you're looking at the Orion Nebula, even sometimes at a higher power, like you're looking at the trapezium, you may want to just kind of move the scope around. Or another good example is looking at the Horsehead. You kind of look at the general area. So there's real advantages sometimes to observing without the ServoCAT engaged. The beauty is, once you're aligned, if you disengage those clutches, it doesn't affect your alignment, because the Argo Navis or the Nexus DSC is still talking to the brains, to the ServoCAT computer. So it always knows where that scope is pointing. So like most people observe in one area of the sky, I'm kind of an all over the sky guy. So sometimes if I want to look at something that's 180 degrees in the other direction, I'll disengage the clutches so I can quickly swing the scope around and save some time, as Josh was saying, because it takes a significant amount of time to swing that scope around in the fast slew mode. It might take 15, 20 seconds to get where you want to be. And over the course of a night, you can save a lot of time. But the real advantage of disengaging the scope is to kind of like, you're looking at the Rosette Nebula, or you're looking at the wide area of the Orion Nebula, or Markarian's chain, or some other extended object. It's just a really nice way to observe.
And
Well,
I
I do
Fred
what
would
you do.
engage during
Mining
my
is
observing
my-
sessions too.
sorry.
I thought at the time when you're doing your 2-star alignment that it was more critical. I'll just test it out, because I agree with you, Bob. I like to push it because it's just much more quick. It's quicker to just push the
Fred,
telescope.
what do you do, Fred? You're the authority.
Far from the authority, but I'm not sure if this is official or not for the Nexus, but I do the trick I learned from my Celestron Next Star mounts. When I'm centering an object, Polaris, for the first alignment star, I make sure my last two movements are up and to the right. If there's any backlash in the system, that tends to take it up. And I found that, and I've been doing that for years now. And ever since I started doing that, I mean, originally when I was doing the alignment with the Argo Navis and the ServoCAT, as long as I got it centered, I was happy. But my go-tos ended up kind of like all over the place in the field of view. since I started doing the last two movements of up and to the right to center the star, I found that my vast majority, better than 90% of my go-tos are within the field of view of a half degree field. And unless I'm up in the Dob hole, then it gets very, very difficult, of course. But because of that, I just always have done now the centering with the up and right buttons as the last two movements. If I overshoot, I bring the star all the way back around so that my last two movements are up and right, and that last right hit is on the crosshair.
That's for star number 1. What about star number 2?
Same thing with star number 2. And if you do the, oh God, brain fart here. The subsequent star calibrations.
Endpoint.
Thank you, the endpoint, yes. If you do them, do the same thing.
Wait, I'm sorry. So Fred, just so I understand, for both stars, it's up and to the right at the end. I understand why you're doing that. And if you overshoot, then you disengage the clutches.
No, if I overshoot, I just bring the star back motorized.
Oh, I see.
So that the last two movements are up and to the right, and that last, doesn't matter how long it is, you can hold it for seconds to move it up and then to the right. But that last button hit, whether it's for 2 seconds, 1 second, 5 seconds, as soon as you hit the crosshair, that's where you want to be.
In fact, the latest version of the ServoCAT software, when you slew to an object, the last two motions it makes is up and to the right. So that basically takes all the slack out of the ground board and the slack out of your altitude cable. So it's just very smoothly tracking the object.
It does that automatically? Interesting.
The current version, the latest software version of whatever, the firmware version of the software, that was added a couple years ago.
God, I haven't upgraded mine for years.
It's just as Fred says, because with the older firmware, you would sometimes, you do your alignment, and it's pretty good, and you'd go to an object, and the object was always far to the right or far to the left or far up or far down, and then you're guiding back to it. But so now in the software, it automatically, when you slew to an object, the last two motions it makes is up and to the right.
Fred,
Related question here, because as many times as many of us have been out on the field together with the same system doing alignments, we've never talked about this till now.
So when you do your alignments, Fred, they're all motorized, or do you? Yeah,
I do them all motorized. Yeah.
And then a related question for everyone that uses this system is that my understanding, which is poor, is that the endpoint refinement doesn't really work on a star-to-star basis. I thought you have to put in some minimum number of stars for that to be effective, or can you even refine with 1 or 2 additional stars?
You need a certain number.
You have to do the initial 2-star alignment to do the endpoint.
Oh, I understand that. But having done that, okay, it's fine, but it's not great. Can you use endpoint alignment where, M is equal to 1, essentially? Can you just put in 1 more star to help the model a little bit? I thought you had to put in some.
You can add up to like 105 stars.
I understand the max, but what's the minimum?
The minimum is how many, so within the endpoint system, you go into your Nexus to set that up. And there's different criteria that you can enforce within that system. For every criteria that you put in there, you have to have a star.
Right, I understand. And there's like 15 or so in the model.
It depends on what your model is. Some models are more advanced than others. So if you have a more advanced model and you've got 15 different points that's addressing, you have to have that many stars. So go into your Nexus, look at your endpoint model, see how many different points you're modeling, and that's the minimum number of stars you can have.
I guess, Josh, that just brings up the question then of, given the model, which I think has around 12 or 15 elements in it, you need that many stars then to refine it. I guess I don't know, maybe there's guidance in some manual somewhere. I don't know which of those model elements are more expendable than others.
The models in the Nexus and the model in the Argo Navis uses something called TPAS. It is actually the exact same program that the Anglo-Australian telescope, the first large professional Altaz telescopes, it's 150 inches, was actually designed to use. And that is in the public domain. And that was the actual software that was put into the same software that drives the Anglo-Australian telescope. Now the Australian telescope down in Coonabarabran is the same software that is in the Argo Navis. The TPAS system is modeled after that. And basically what the models try to do, to answer your question as I understand it, it's correcting for the lack of orthogonality between your optical axis, your mechanical axes, and the formulas that you use to correct more and more of those abnormalities require more and more data points. But you need a minimum of 2 just to get an alignment. Does that answer your question?
No, the models have a different number of parameters in them to correct for various imperfections.
Correct.
And you need a certain number of alignment stars in the endpoint routine so that you can specify an improved model. Josh
Exactly.
is suggesting you can go and take out some of the model elements to reduce the number of stars needed. And I'm simply saying that of the model elements, I have no way of knowing which are the more critical ones and shouldn't be taken out versus the ones that are more expendable.
Yeah.
So we actually had Serge give a presentation at our club. And I mean, I know you guys were talking earlier about club sharing meetings. We have a video of that we're working on getting edited and possibly posted on the Chestmont YouTube site. You could also even do that if you guys wanted sometime, just play that in one of your meetings. Serge goes into detail there, breaking down what is important, what's not important for the alt-as driven Dobbs.
Okay, that sounds
I typically don't take the time to mess with that. So I certainly can't speak with any real authority. If I remember correctly, after his presentation, I went in and changed my data points, I think, to 8. So there's 8 things in there that matter most for Dobbs. So I think if I were to do an endpoint now, I'd need a minimum of 8 stars.
Okay.
But Serge would be the guy to tell you which ones most apply the most effect to the scope.
You can actually send Serge an email. I mean,
we communicate frequently. He's
he would tell you in a heartbeat exactly what you need to do.
Yeah, definitely. He's great customer service.
Oh, absolutely.
I've only done the endpoint once, and honestly, I felt it wasn't really much of any better at all than doing the 2-star alignment with my scope.
That's what I experienced.
I've stayed with 2 stars, and it gets me observing.
That's a testament to how well built these instruments are.
Yeah, I mean, Fred, I agree. Not that I've done a full endpoint, but it seems like a whole lot of hassle. And if I do manage to take some care, and I didn't even know about the up to the right trick, but I'll certainly start implementing it.
Yeah, I think the endpoint is probably more designed for stationary telescopes in observatories.
Okay.
Once you set that up, you can put all the parameters you want in there. You can go all the way up to 105 stars if you want, and you just do it once and set it and forget it. Because the Nexus remembers all that stuff, even when you shut it down.
Yeah, that makes total sense. My peer-mounted telescope with the astrophysics software has exactly that. You let it build a model with a jillion stars and it's done. You don't mess around with it.
And do you find it gets better and better with each passing observing session? Are you building that model continually or not necessarily?
No, there was sort of there was a before and after. So there was a before with just a conventional alignment. And then we had it run over the sky and put in another 30 stars or so. I don't remember. Bill will probably know. Will remember. And after that, it was much more accurate. Or not much more, because it was good before, but it was noticeably more accurate.
Yeah, I think it was 55 stars.
Okay. But I think what Fred says is completely consistent with that, but you're not going to go out there and do a 15-star endpoint to improve your pointing that night. Which is why I asked, actually. Yeah, so.
I'm actually curious.
Like I said, 90+% of the time, I'm getting go-tos within a half a degree field of view.
I'm with you. I agree.
Real quick search.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing to realize about that, the amount using 55 stars is it did it all automatically. You used the camera with plate solving to decide how each star was aligned and went on to the next one before you knew it was done. So it didn't take very long to do it. It would be murder to do 55 manually.
If you do a plate solve, often each time you do your run, if you're in an observatory and you turn it on the next time on a warm restart, you should continue with your plate model. And every time you do a plate solve, it improves it over time. That's what happens with me. I turn it on. I do a couple alignments, just plate solve. And then when I turn it off for the night, then the next time I go on, I do a couple more plate solves. And over a period of time, that model becomes better and better and better.
Is that a Nexus, Ron, that you're referencing there?
No, it's a Gemini too.
Gemini 2. Okay. I am curious about this because I'm actually currently looking to potentially lease some land and put, I was originally thinking I was just going to put a shed on it that I would roll the scope in and out, fully assembled, just to save me all the setup and teardown. But I'm thinking now, maybe I just want to do a roll-off observatory, and, you know, over months and years of observing, you just, every time you observe, just put in, you know, 3 more stars. That really makes that big a difference. After a year of observing, I could have, you know, 100 stars in there without even trying hard. It might really wake up the pointing accuracy. It might be worth doing more of a roll-off versus wheeling the scope in and out every time. So I want to talk to Serge about that as well. See if it sounds like the guys with the observatories, you guys build pretty extensive models over time. It could make a big difference.
I have had my scope a couple years now remotely from in my house. I run it, and I have not had to change the model at all. I just turn it on, go to a star, do a plate solve, and hit anything else. It nails it. If you move the scope physically itself, then you have to do a new model.
And what kind of scope is that?
I have a 102. I have 2 scopes together. I have a 10-inch Meade and a 102 Explorer.
Yeah, unlike these guys, I have to redo it every time I set up because I don't have an observatory. So I set up my equipment wherever I am, you know, whether it's a star party or home or whatever. But because I'm plate solving, I'll do like 10 plate solves sometimes in a night, sometimes 3. It depends on how well it's doing. And if it's not doing well, I'll just do a couple more.
I remember seeing you do that down at Sean's.
Yep.
You were showing that to me that night. Yeah.
Yeah, I have had, there's been nights we're talking about alignment and that. There's been some nights, you know, we're out all night and I might be like 4 or 5 hours into the observing session and I'll notice that my alignment isn't what it used to be. You know, Fred was talking about, you know, it should be, you know, fairly tight, you know, every time you do a slew for a new object. And I was like, why is it off all of a sudden? You know, something happened. I don't know what. I don't know what the technical problem is, but then I'll just do another 2-star alignment real quick and I'm good to go again. It's, you know, it doesn't take that long once you're up and running.
Will you get an object in the field of view in your 10 ethos most of the time, or will it be a little outside?
A lot of the, I'll say 50% of the time it's in the eyepiece, and the rest of the time it's either right on the edge or just outside the field.
And are you leveling your telescope?
No, I just, like, if I'm at Blue Mountain, I just set up on one of the pads that Frank made, and or if I'm, you know, Hawk Mountain or something like that, I just where I'm at.
I think, Josh, you showed that to me, and I've been doing that recently, and I think that the go-to has improved. Maybe you want to mention that? Doesn't that help a lot to have the telescope perfectly level when you're doing the 2-star alignment?
I level mine, and I see no difference. There's on a few occasions where I know the night's going to be short, it's down and dirty setup, and I won't level it. I personally don't notice any difference.
I've been building these systems since the early 80s in programming them. I built my own system. I've got an encoder interface that I built for $10. And the math that's used, you don't have to level the scope. What is critical, though, is for you guys, when you go vertical, that means vertical to the base.
Right.
You can have your scope at a 45-degree angle on a side of the hill, but it's vertical to the base or horizontal to the base to get the math. You guys might want to consider using Sky Safari. I use Sky Safari all the time because you don't have to go vertical or horizontal to align. They got a different alignment system in there, and they also have 10-star improvement. And you know, it puts it in the eyepiece almost every single time that I use my scopes. And like
what kind of scope is that?
I got a 13-inch Coulter, and I've also got Sean's. I bought Sean's 22-inch that I'm rebuilding now.
Oh, nice.
Excellent.
So
Nice.
you know, I looked at the Argo Novice, and why I use Sky Safari. I don't like pushing buttons, and I can look at my tablet and I can see exactly where I am in the sky, and I don't have to look at a star chart. I can see here, there's another galaxy I want to look at, and just push right to it and go.
So is that a difficult setup to pull off?
I'm set up in 2 minutes, literally. And
No,
I've built a couple of guys in the club I've built the systems or built my systems, and they can attest to how easy it is to use it.
I mean, to make the initial interface.
It takes, if you know how to solder, you got to solder 4 wires.
And just to be, Dave's talking about a push-to system, not a go-to system.
But
essentially the math is the same that's behind it.
Right, but I believe with the Sky Safari, it will interface with an Argo with the ServoCAT also. So you can do the same thing where you're looking at your tablet, and then you just hit go to, and it'll send the commands. And I got to set it up to look at it, but I bet you I could set it up the same way.
Now, once you set that up, David, is there a way to switch back and forth? Let's say I will go out one night and I don't want to use the laptop. Can I use the Nexus at that point, or once you commit to that system, you're forced?
No, you would just plug your encoders into my little interface versus the Nexus.
Okay. So do you have to be a club member to get your assistance with this?
No.
So I have to
No,
join.
we were thinking about trying to have a project where we can build these things. Like I said, they're real easy to build.
So
I'd be very curious about that. I always am struggling with getting good alignments. I always have with that scope.
If you're getting bad alignments, it's because your telescope is not orthogonal. One of your axes is you're not at 90 degrees to each other. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So essentially, have you built your own? You built a DSC essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I started building these things using a Commodore 64 back in the early 80s. And I've been building them ever since.
Man, we're old.
Yeah, we are.
Why'd you have to say that?
One thing you guys should note is that we have regular astronomy workshop meetings that aren't on the second or third Tuesdays or the other Tuesdays of the month. And so at those meetings, you can get help with setting up systems like that. You can get help if you're having trouble with your scope. You can share information. You can have discussions, and we can help you with anything.
Yeah, DAS, we've been kicking around the idea of, like Dave said, doing a workshop around these things, and, you know, even toying around with the idea of like having the club go and buy a bunch of, let's call them kitting out all the components, you know, if we had enough people that were interested in building one. So all kinds of ideas, but yeah, we haven't, I think there's been a number of people in the club that have set up the, you know, the DIY digital push to, you know, digital setting circles.
Yep. So
Yeah, I've set one up, and I can tell you it's a relatively straightforward DIY project, and especially with somebody with Dave's expertise to help you through it.
But Josh, I think more to the point of what you were saying, I don't know that this system would give you any better pointing, because again, the math behind it's the same. You know, I would take to heart Dave's comment that it might be a inherent issue with your telescope, with which a different system is not going to resolve.
Right. Right. I think the azimuth is actually off center a little bit in the rocker box, and I think that's probably always been this scope's problem. It seems a little off on the right ascension each time. And like I said, I tweaked the endpoint down to the minimum number so it would be more user friendly. And I can't say I really saw a big difference with that, but it wasn't the most detailed endpoint deal. So, this actually has been an awesome presentation, Bob. I appreciate you guys letting us in.
Yeah.
Because, for as much observing as I do, I've picked up quite a few things here along the way that could offer some good assistance with getting that go-to issue straightened out.
I agree.
I'm a star hopper. I use a star chart. So if you get me within a degree of it, most of the stuff I'm going for, I have to make sure I'm looking at it anyway because it's so faint. I got to make sure it's in the right field of view. So I'm just used to centering off of the finder, but it's always annoyed me a little bit. I know Fred is, he just goes to everything. I don't think you star hop hardly at all, Fred. So
I don't have enough heartbeats left for star hop.
That's my line, Fred.
I think if you guys use a tablet with Sky Safari, you don't have to use a star chart. You just see exactly what's there. And you just push right to it. And that's the beauty. I've seen stuff that I never would have thought even looking at because, it's too dim or whatever, and I don't want to star hop. But heck, all I got to do is move the scope to the cursors over the object and look. If I can see it, I can see it. If I can't, I can't.
Yeah, I bought the interface at NEAF a few years ago, but never hooked it up. So I'll have to revisit that.
So after the pandemic, the way that would work is we'd have a regular workshop every week. That's not a main meeting night like this one. And so every Tuesday we would get a little more done until we met the goal of completing the DSCs would be the plan. Likewise, if you're having trouble with your scope, again, after the pandemic, you could always bring it out on a Tuesday night and we could poke around with it if we could help you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's Tuesday in September.
Yeah, it might be a while. I don't know.
Yeah, and just for the guests amongst us, just to clarify, so the DAS, we hold our formal meetings on the third Tuesday of every month, just as we're doing tonight. But the other Tuesdays, a smaller group of people will get together up at the observatory. We call it Astronomy Workshop. It's a lot of chat and beer drinking, but there's also some projects going on. And we do have it open as a time for people to work on projects or get help on projects. Or we also offer to the public, hey, if you've got a telescope, you don't know how to use it, bring it up. We'll show you how to use it, try to figure it out, all that good stuff. So something we definitely look forward to doing once we get out of quarantine, picking that back up again.
And we do have at Mount Cuba Observatory, and our members have a bunch of tools that we can use to fix up scopes, to test scopes, to examine them, to try and fix problems with them. And so we have the resources, we can help. Hopefully.
Great. Well, I'm going to sign out. Bob, congratulations on a great presentation. I really enjoyed it. It was awesome.
Very enjoyable.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was awesome.
Yep.
A lot of good collaboration, dialogue with everybody. That's really a lot more involved than I was anticipating with input from everybody.
No, it was great. You presented so much information. It was easy to jump in and start dialogues.
A great talk spurs on great discussions. So.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Pick it up to 36 as well.
Yeah, but like David was saying with the Sky Safari, that's on my DIY list for my 10-inch stop, is I want to get that connected with Sky Safari and use, because it's a push-to scope anyway, and I want to get it connected to Sky Safari and use that only on it and get away from the telescope control.
Bill McKibben, you did that with your 10-inch, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I've also got it set up for my 18, which I haven't really done much with, but I've got that ready to go. So I can use the same interface, just an extra set of encoders. And
hey, Bill, what brand is that 18?
It's an Obsession.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, now I have another question before I sign out. Do you need Wi-Fi for that hookup?
You can do Wi-Fi or you can do Bluetooth.
Okay. Okay.
Wi-Fi's more universal in that if you don't have an Apple tablet, Apple uses a proprietary Bluetooth interface. So I prefer Wi-Fi because it's universal. You can use it with Android or Apple products. But
And
I think you can do it both ways if you want.
Okay.
And the controller or the Wi-Fi is right on the controller, so
Yeah, the
you
Wi-Fi.
don't need an external Wi-Fi source
Right,
built in.
right.
Yeah, the telescope
Oh,
creates
okay, that's what
a
I was
Wi-Fi
asking. Yeah, yeah.
hotspot that you tap
Right.
into with your tablet or phone.
Gotcha. Yep.
So you
Okay.
can be in the middle of nowhere and,
Right.
you know,
And does that pull any kind of significant power usage? Do you gotta?
Nope. I use one of those little 5-volt.
It's a teensy board, right?
Nah, I got away from the Tinsy.
Yeah.
I'm using an ESP12 module, which is designed just for Wi-Fi.
Okay.
And for powering it, I use a one of these rechargeable cell phone batteries, emergency cell phone shower charging batteries. And I
like
think,
this, right, Dave?
yeah, one of those. It lasts for like 12 days of continuous use.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Doesn't draw much current, so
I don't think Fred has even had an observing session that long.
no.
No,
Not for 12 days.
And if
Gotta
you're
go
not
to New
familiar,
Mexico for that.
if you're not familiar with the boards, they're similar to the Arduinos.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same program you use. It's the same Arduino program interface to program them. So.
Good night. Thank
Guys,
you
I
very
gotta
much.
head
Great
out too.
meeting.
Good night, everyone.
Well,
Great
that
to-
discussion
thanks a lot.
certainly